Hello there, and welcome to the Impact Zone podcast. We are back once again to talk more TNA wrestling shenanigans. And today we're talking about drawing a symmetry or parallels, whatever you want to call it, harkening back to certain things. Specifically, we're talking right now about Nick Nemeth drawing asymmetry or parallels back to something and someone else. This, to me, the carrot, the coin, did not drop for quite some time for me on this one. And I just realized it, maybe last week, I don't know now. But I kind of wanted to talk about it, I guess, because we're here. We've got this channel. We might as well, use it. It exists. People do sometimes listen to what I have to say here and whatnot. So I hope to bring the content to the people. That is the goal here. So we will talk about it. As what we can. It is like, as I said before, I was very low on Nick Nemeth winning the title, and I'm still a bit low on him winning the title. I don't really think they did a good enough job of building him up to be like the guy that was gonna win this match. But in what they're trying to do right now, I feel like that, and it takes some time for it to simmer, and maybe I took some of that, and didn't really give it enough time to go, okay, well, what are they going to do? I guess I didn't see them going down this route, really. I mean, it's kind of like an obvious route now that, again, hindsight's 2020 or whatever. But it is a pretty clear route, obviously, and it's a route that I don't know exactly how they're going to execute it, because it's one of those things that it's very tough sometimes to execute these things and have them all timed, and that's, I guess, where the head scratching and whatnot sort of comes into it, and you start going, well, I know what I think I want, and I know what I think the fan base wants, and that sort of thing. So it's going to be very hard to get those things that we want or we hope to see, and I think, and perhaps this is a bit of context that came out of the show itself and whatnot of Slammiversary and some of the subsequent tapings and I think it even came out on Twitter that Jordan Grace said that, a lot of stuff was planned for Slammiversary and whatnot, but unfortunately due to travel issues and due to the outages of a lot of computer systems during that time, a lot of things got shut down at the worst possible time, perhaps, for this fan base, and that sucks. So we might know maybe in a few years. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But we might know in 6 months. You never know how long a turnaround is going to be of when do we get to know what some of those tentative plans would have been, and what could have been, and that sort of thing. So that definitely does suck, but anyway, that does explain a lot of the issues that I had with the show, and I didn't really think about it, and perhaps even the issues that I had with the show with actually watching it, because, as I said, I wasn't able to watch it in its entirety and had to re-buy the show just to get back to watching the end of the show, which is the part that drove me mad because it was just like, why are they going in this direction? They haven't really built Nemeth to be that strong of a, singles star and whatnot. Like, it's fine if he's in the mix or whatever, I guess. I don't know, dude. Like, that's fine. Like, you can still have the saying of, like, he has a somewhat legitimate gripe of not being the champion, but that's not a gripe of being, like, still being able to win the belt, like, really. Like, I don't know the level of investment from fans, but I don't think that that really matters because I think we're going in a different direction. And I think that direction is kind of obvious to some, but perhaps not to everyone. And I guess the issue, I guess, here will be when contracts run up and things like that, because I feel like a lot of people expect certain things and whatnot when certain wrestlers' contracts are up and things like that. But we've seen a lot of stuff happening of late with crossovers with WWE, with people going there. But even like, I guess Jordan Grace, she was, not to say that she was a one time, but she's been more of a one time character there than a lot of the other characters that we've grown to know in TNA. Like the Rascals, they've been there a few times. They're challenging for the NXT titles, tag titles, this next week, I believe, and whatnot. So, yeah, there's a bit going on there, and Joe Hendry seems to be there a fair amount. Um, so it's interesting to look at, and that in that side of, well, do contracts even mean that much when companies can and will work together? Like, why not get the best of both worlds in a sense? Keep Joe Hendry in TNA as long as possible, and let him finish out his journey there, and then let him transition to WWE if he wants to. Like, if he doesn't want to, then he can stay in TNA. Like, again, I think that people's perspective of saying, oh, well, they have to be going to WWE, or this person has to be going to WWE, or whatever. Like, people who were saying Jordan Grace will go to WWE, I don't think she will. Like, not that it's impossible that she could or would go to WWE. She could go to WWE. It's not impossible. Never say never in wrestling, but I could see her staying in TNA, honestly, because she stayed in TNA for quite some time. Her contract's been up a couple of times in her stint in TNA, and she's opted to stay in TNA. Yes, her star power was probably a little bit more limited than what it had been in the last couple of years, or whatever it's been. But still, like, in the last couple of years, she still had a couple of contracts up, when her star power, perhaps it hasn't been at the level that it is at now, perhaps, but she was still a very high level wrestler on their division. And you start to say, oh, well, what if Jordan left TNA back in the day, or whatever it was, a few years ago, whatever it was? Well, yeah, well, then I guess they would have invested time and effort and energy and whatnot into somebody else, and airtime and whatnot. They would have figured something out. I'm sure they would have figured something out, because they always do. So, and again, that's what I mean by people who, again, say, oh, well, it'll kill TNA if she leaves, or it'll hurt TNA if she leaves. Yes, it'll hurt them if she leaves, but, at the end of the day, they will build their division back up, because, TNA is very good at that. They will find somebody and they will take them from, the bottom to the top. They will build those, they will pick two or three people and go, okay, let's put these people at the top of our, roster. That's what they did with Jordan and Diana. That's what they did. They decided, okay, this person and this person are going to be at the, very top of our division for a couple of good years, you know, and they've got a whole bunch of other characters and people to work with, but these are the top two people that are going to carry the division. All they need to do is do that again. But anyway, getting away, I can always get away from sort of, I guess, the topic, but giving the context and then the situation that we're in, like fleshing it out and making sure we understand where we're at and why we're at this point and whatnot, and saying, hey, people will talk about these things in concert with what's happening with TNA at every point from now on until whenever this sort of thing, I don't even know if it ends, like, does it end? Like, or how does it end, or whatever? What is that end goal, or is there one? Like, who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But again, yeah, just understanding that level of context. And again, Nick Nemeth is a pretty big name in WWE. He's not the biggest name, but a lot of people know who he is over there in WWE, realistically. And if he's said this on this week's episode of TNA Impact, that he would defend the belt anywhere, cough cough NXT, cough cough, at any time. So cough cough NXT, at some point he was already in NXT and was actually the NXT champion. I believe he's won the AAA and one of, like, what's the New Japan title called? The International something, whatever. Yeah, he's won a New Japan title. Right. Okay. Whatever it's called. I don't know. But yeah, like, just saying he's won titles in the three, major promotions that he's in. Like, I'm not going to count GCW and I don't know, whatever else, like, other indie companies he's really in. Like, the proper, more major promotions that are kind of the super indies, I guess, out there. So yeah, those are big accomplishments, winning the TNA title as well. He's got his schedule pretty full there, I'm pretty sure. But back to the parallels that they're sort of drawing or trying to draw, and why they're trying to draw them and where that's going. As I said, we know that eventually it feels like Joe Hendry is at least going to be the world champion at some point for a short period of time. Who knows when that exactly begins and when that exactly ends. I think if you're going to go in that direction, you need to start really putting the pieces together very quickly in some ways and in some fashion, in some regard. I don't know whether this is a promise per se, but it was sort of a promise made by Scott D'Amore, and I know that might not carry much weight, that TNA would come back to England at some point in the future, in this year, in fact. So, and I felt like, well, is Bound for Glory the right place? Because I felt like, wow, man, you want this thing to happen at your biggest event, don't you? But the idea, as I sort of said, I was like, man, that wouldn't make any sense, because it's like only a couple of months away. You don't want to, do what I'm thinking they're going to probably do, in the next month or so, and then go to Bound for Glory in like 2 months or whatever it is, and then have Joe Hendry win. I don't think that makes any goddamn sense, unless it's not in the way that I'm thinking about it. But we can wait and see about that, and we'll keep our eyes on the situation. So the parallels, the sort of way that they're presenting what Nick Nemeth's doing actually came from a line that Tom Hannafin said on air, and it finally made me connect the dots after a few days of stewing on it and trying to think about, why are they doing this with Nemeth? Where are they going with this? They've just done this stuff at Slammiversary. They've got to be putting the title on Joe Hendry at some point, and they've got to be like trying to build this narrative around him and Josh Alexander. And of course, that's when I guess it kind of clicked, was what I started thinking, well, he said, so for some reason it kind of rang in my head. He mentioned the last time the title was defended like on a weekly episode of Impact, which was by, guess who? Josh Alexander, who had the longest tenured title run in the company's history thus far. And I was thinking that Moose would have a year-long title run, and I think he still potentially could have had a fairly long run, but I think that they wanted to push the envelope of putting Joe Hendry on the map and trying to get him into that main event picture. I still think you could have done it in another way rather than having Nick Nemeth, who really didn't need to win it that much to get this title onto somebody else or whatever, I guess. But again, I guess it's one of those things where they didn't perhaps want Moose to fight Josh Alexander, though people would still want to see it, even though it would be now heel versus heel, and whatnot. But still, like, and again, I still wanted to see that match at some point. Maybe they'll come back to it at some point. But then again, like I said before, I think I said before somewhere that you should save these big matches for as long as you sort of can in some ways. And again, once somebody is too up on somebody, like Josh is to Moose, it's like, well, you don't want to set that precedent too much of, like, Josh is going to win. Like, there was already kind of that feeling, like, well, Josh has won before, so the logical inference is if they meet, that Josh would win. So just having that, like, little bump in the road of saying, well, wait a minute, now we're on a different course and whatnot. So now, who knows, perhaps, we'll have to wait and see. But again, just thinking like, oh, well, now Moose will win for reasons, and then maybe, he'll get a couple wins back, and then, or whatever, who knows. But still, we'll have to wait and see. That might be in another year or two, who knows. We'll have to wait and see till that. But yeah, my thought right now is that they are prepping Ziggler's, for lack of a better term, to lose to Alexander at some point, and some point fairly soon, and that makes his title run a little less good and a little less impactful in many ways. Sometimes a short title run can do a lot in storytelling for the next title run, like we saw with Josh Alexander's was it like 5-minute title run. Like, it's so short, in a sense that it's so memorable, like, you don't need to remember much about it because it's like, it set up that whole story for 6 months, whatever it was. And, Josh finally winning the title after, climbing his way, trying to get back to Moose and all this after 6 months or whatever it was. Because again, they just couldn't turn around the next week or the next month or whatever it was and say, hey, here's the belt back. They had to say, okay, well, let's draw this out for 6 months or whatever it was. so that Moose has a proper title run, and so there's proper heat and anticipation and build and buy rate. Again, the most important things for shows, for anything. There's something here for fans to chomp on into. But anyway, that is where I feel like they're going, and I felt like I said, I felt like Joe could win it at Bound for Glory if they're going to go to the UK, but maybe they're going to have another show in the UK. I don't know. But then again, like you even if you look at Josh winning it, I guess within the next month or so, August, September, you know, maybe August. Let's say August. Perhaps at Emergence, I don't know. You kind of want to get the Moose thing out of the way, or get his title rematch, or maybe you want to leave it alone. I don't know. It's sort of tough, to see whether, what's the go there. And you don't, but then again, you don't want Moose to lose clean. So having him lose would be just detrimental, like in a one-on-one scenario. So knowing when to pick the bones is kind of important and relevant and all that sort of stuff. So you have to put it at the right time and whatnot. So just knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it, and all that is important and whatnot. So all that to say that yeah, I think that Josh has to win it very soon, as soon as possible, if that is the plan, which I think it is, because that's what they're trying to sort of, draw some sort of, thought towards. Like, was the last time somebody defended the title, in a babyface way, and on, TNA Impact. So you're kind of drawing parallels to it in those regards. So then you're thinking, okay, Josh is going to win it at some point here, like very soon, gotta be. Whether that's from Nemeth being injured or him pinning Nemeth, fairly clean in the middle of the ring, it does remain to be seen. As I said, everyone and their dog wants Joe Hendry, but I still think everyone and their dog wants to see Josh Alexander versus AJ Styles. And everyone wants to see Josh Alexander versus AJ Styles either way, but everyone wants to see AJ Styles challenge for the TNA title. Like, how long? Like, AJ said he's probably retiring this year. So, like, you're going to have his last match be at a random, show, or you're going to have it be at, like, Slammiversary or Bound for Glory or something. The biggest shows in TNA, And again, the thing that he's, most recognized with being TNA and being in Slammiversary or Bound for Glory, So there's that. So it doesn't make any sense there in that regard if he didn't do that. But it's like, well, how do you not culminate one of the biggest stars in your company at the biggest show? Like, so it starts becoming like, well, are they perhaps going to do something? And I don't know how they could do this, but where perhaps they even mirror the Josh Alexander sort of title win, where Josh wins the gauntlet for the gold, and then Joe Hendry wins the world title at Bound for Glory, perhaps. And then Josh Alexander cashes in his, you know, gauntlet trophy to beat Hendry, and then Hendry's having to fight like just like Alexander did to get back at Alexander. So kind of like the flip side of the coin there. And I don't think we went too deep into the Josh Alexander heel turn, but I think it's freaking absolutely genius. I still want to see more of it, obviously, because it's just started. But again, it's just like he didn't really give much of a promo in terms of like what explaining his actions and whatnot. So that even more makes it more like you can kind of almost read between the lines, and that's always the case with a lot of wrestling and a lot of like things. You can kind of read between the lines in some scenarios, and it's kind of obvious because of kind of what happened in the match in a sense. But you know, still having some of that context, even if it's heel context, which isn't always truthful context, but it also sometimes has that glimmer of truth to it in a sense. You know, is really, really useful for informing the direction of the story. And I guess we already know that in a sense. And I can almost feel like I know where that story is going. But I feel like, again, if you're going to have AJ return and everyone wanting to see AJ and Alexander as one of their like top matches of seeing AJ return to TNA, it's like, dude, like let's figure it out. Like again, do whatever it takes, and perhaps that was partly the plan or had something to do with it or whatever, and there was that whole issue with the travel and whatnot that prevented it. So we'll never know. But again, like just think, oh, we might not never know, but we might know one day. Who knows? So again, putting it back into that context of, trying to please everyone, trying to give everyone something that, again, like obviously you could do a triple threat, or obviously you could like do other things and whatnot, that sort of thing. I think that it would work. I do think that it would work best if Josh somehow screws over even more Joe Hendry, like perhaps in a number one contenders battle royal or something like that. But then again, you're starting to feel like, again, like it's so bad to feel like, man, are they like, you feel like you want them to kind of take you on this ride in a sense of being like, okay, let's go for a ride, let's go for 3 or 4 or 5 months or whatever it is. I don't think it's that long, but yeah, like let's go on this journey for a few months, like instead of just like arriving at this destination and then trying to pivot to something else, like pivoting away and doing something else. Well, isn't bad, but it just sort of leaves a bad taste in the mouth overall. Like I said before, like it already is a bad taste in some way to feel like, well, why is, this person who wasn't really built to win the title, winning the title, I don't know, doesn't make much sense. So, we're getting. It's funny that they sort of were working on some Steve Macklin stuff there, seemingly almost turning him babyface, or sort of trying to, but they were doing some lacking work there or whatever it was. I don't think there was enough direction there with that. But now they're like, well, he's back to being heel, whatever, basically. So yeah, and his motivations for doing so seem, 100% legit, because the fans said, na 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 na, hey goodbye when he got eliminated. So fair enough. So, but again, I feel like that's what they need. They need that sort of thing, because Macklin's a very good heel. I don't think he'd play a very good baby face. I think it's just better having him as a heel. I think, some people can play both, but some people can't. And that's kind of, I was worried a little bit about Joshi. I guess I was worried about Swan, but honestly, he's not really carrying that much in the way of like healing that much. I guess that really, like, in terms of promos and whatnot, although Josh hasn't really done much in terms of promos that yet, so we'll have to wait and see. It's top dollar or whatever. AJ Francis carrying the promos there for the most part, so I don't know. But anyway, it does make your head scratch with thoughts of being like, well, how do you execute this? How do you execute this? Like, because I think the culmination of the story, like I said, like, it feels like, wow, like, I think that the whole, like, this is a Cody story was like too much. And like, I think some people, perhaps needed to, chill a bit and realize, hey, this isn't just the same story that WWE was telling and whatnot. I still think the system can be a very effective unit and a very effective, group. And I think that they should be, used as such. I think that, you have to keep them in the mix in some regard, even if it's just in the tag division for a while. I don't know how you do that, but again, like, I feel like perhaps they wanted to do the ABC versus the Hardys, match, and they couldn't justify having two babyface teams go up against each other unless it was, over the titles, in some regard or whatnot. So I think that that's perhaps the idea there, that, that might be, I don't know, again, because you never know what the Hardys are, how long they're going to be there, or whatever their, situation or deal, or how interested WWE is going to be, and all of this sort of stuff. So yeah, I don't know. It's a really odd set of circumstances there, I guess, because they're basically there on a handshake and whatnot. So, but yeah. Either way, they're like, they're helping, in some ways. And I think that's where, like, some people, like, I don't know if Nick Nemeth's title reign's really helping that much, because it's like, or whatever, or would help that much, even if it did continue. Like, people still see him, and this is why I say that they didn't do a good enough job of building him up to be a main event guy there. They didn't do a good enough job of that, of saying this is a main event, top tier, guy. If you're going to use somebody and you're going to say, hey, the plan is this, this is a top tier guy, whatever, sure. I don't know, but it feels really odd in some regards. I don't know. But yeah. You don't want title runs to come to too many abrupt ends. You don't want to be playing hot potato with titles. That's what I think about when I think about like them putting the title on to somebody and then saying, okay, well, in 2 or 3 months or whatever it is, you're going to drop it. Like, or even in, whatever it is, 4 months, whatever, or so, you're going to drop it. Or maybe it's more, because maybe they're going to save it to next year, some point, sometime. I don't know. But yeah. What else are you going to do on a, maybe it's not like going to be a pay-per-view then, if they go back to England. Like, maybe they'll just go there for a couple of shows or something. I don't know. Like, that's a lot of work, in my opinion, just to go there for a TV taping or whatever. So making it worth your while and saying, hey, let's, even if we're having a B pay-per-view, whatever, over there, at least there's something, and we'll have a few dates. Yeah. And see how we go. And next time we're going, over there, it's going to Scotland, and we're going to put Joe on the mountaintop, because that's got to be the ultimate goal of this whole thing, of like, okay, this is where we're going and this is why, because he's the most popular person in the company, and it only makes sense to, he is our top drawer. But again, as we've said before, the interest from the fans, like 90% of the interest comes in the chase of the title, not of, winning it or retaining it, or even winning it for the second time or third time, fourth time, whatever. It's in obtaining it for that first time. And, maybe Joe won't stay in TNA. Maybe he will. Maybe he won't. Like I've said, like a few people have stayed, there, and a few people haven't stayed there. But, you have to wait and see what will happen. And people whose immediate reaction is, of course they're going to WWE or whatever, is like, well, are they? They've, like, a few of these people have had, opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to go to WWE, and they didn't. So, but yeah, those parallels are being drawn. That's the reason why they're being drawn, because that's the direction that they're trying to go. They're trying to go in this direction of, let's, put this title on Alexander, so that then he can overcome, that Joe Hendry can overcome Alexander, and become the top guy, and Alexander can still be a great heel, and you can even put the title back on Moose. Or, I start to think that after a certain period of time of, I don't know, like 4 or 5 years or whatever it is, maybe you need to start freshening up every few years your like main event picture. But having like your solid main eventers that are now is still important. You can't just move away from your solid main eventers while they're solid main eventers. Like Joe Hendry's going to be a solid main eventer in TNA for a few years if he stays, like easily. If he goes to WWE, I don't see why he wouldn't, rise up the ranks pretty quickly and become a very solid main eventer over there as well. So, and you just build your roster around somebody like that. It's like a Hulk Hogan, or Steve Austin. You build your whole roster around somebody like that. But once they move on or do something else or start losing popularity, you start going, okay, well, let's transition them into another role, or somebody else has caught fire. And that's the idea that they had with Josh. It's like, well, Joe's caught fire and we need heels for him to fight. And, it helps Josh Alexander realistically. I don't think I did a deep enough dive into this, and I don't think I could do a deep enough dive into it, really. But again, like, it helps somebody who's feeling a little like stale, I guess. And it did feel like he'd become a little bit stagnant. He's been doing the same kind of thing for a while. He could have culminated with a nice babyface win or whatever, but like, it realistically, once somebody has caught fire, you're always going to be playing second fiddle unless you're that person, for the most part. So just saying, okay, well, I need to, shift myself to the other side if I don't want to just be playing second fiddle to this person, or, in another division, like in a mid card role or in a tag team role or in a X division role or whatever else it is. And like, this is something that I pulled up there the other day and thought of, that it doesn't really matter who is in the like women's tag division or even in the women's division that much, because they're not the main draw of the company that much. You still want to see those divisions doing well and whatnot, but it really doesn't matter to the overall like scheme of things that much. Like, as long as you have your top guys and have some diversity and things like that, I think that the wrestling and the storytelling and everything that goes into it more so is the draw of, again, getting to see these things and getting to exclusively see them, when they happen and how they happen, and even seeing things before they're on TV or whatever and things like that. So again, just getting those opportunities and whatnot is a big deal. So, but yeah, no, I like, yeah, I kind of think that it's a long process that he's like Joe has been wrestling for like 10 years, and I think he was in WWE once, like many years ago, and so, but it's really in the last year or so that's like, or whatever it's been, that's like he's really caught on fire. So you always have to try to play that hand. You always have to, start working with, that's where we're beginning here with this person. I kind of wanted to see Josh Alexander like form a new Team Canada of some description, because it's kind of like, well, you need guys for Hendry to beat up along the way to getting to Josh, because otherwise it's like, you know, he doesn't have obstacles to overcome, you know, and then it's just like, well, it's too much of a straight shot type deal to kind of get there. And like, how can you tell that story unless you find something else that, you know, keeps him away from the title, or whatever? I don't know. So just making sure you get some of that stuff together, and whatnot, and it all makes sense. It's not just bam and done in less than 6 months. I think 6 months is a bare minimum. Like, realistically, it should probably be a year. I think you can hold off, or maybe a little bit less, maybe 8 months, something like that. I think you can hold off on putting Hendry at the top more easily. I don't think, like, if you're going to bring AJ Styles back, or you're going to bring somebody else back for Josh to fight, or whatever else it is, in that real main event picture, and then you've just got Joe working his way through something else in the semi-main. Meanwhile, still building him up to that position and making people want to see it and want to see it and want to see it, and that finally they do. That's how they could, do do their own version of like All In, but do it in, Scotland, and see if they can pull 10K people, whatever else it is. Though maybe they can, maybe they can't. Who knows? Like, or maybe they can even get a bigger. Who knows? So, like, if they say, okay, well, we're going to shoot for the moon, we're going to build this for a good 6-8 months or whatever else it is, or whatnot, and have a really good, direction for it, and whatnot, and make it make sense. And that, yeah, like, even maybe you even just say, hey, maybe let's just leave him over on NXT and not use him as much, but like start using him, when this thing picks up, and start saying, hey, I didn't appreciate being kicked in the balls or whatever. Now I'm back, and whatnot, and I still really want that title, and I wouldn't mind taking it off you or whatever. Like, start there somehow, some way, and you've got your narrative easily enough, and just like figuring how to get from that, initial point to like where you're ending up, and what date or what time or what space that actually occurs in. So, but yeah, we'll wait and see. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for listening. I hope you guys have enjoyed this one, and I hope you guys will join me again in another one.